Hello, everybody. Welcome into The Cycle. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined, I would say as always, but it's been actually a minute since we've done a show together, but joined today, certainly, and always going forward, by Mike Maher. Maher, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right. It's great to have you back. We haven't done a show this offseason or really since, I want to say July.
Must have been.
Since you kind of abandoned me for football. Yeah, I'm doing all right. Happy to do the show. Happy to get the dynamic duo, the gruesome twosome, back together.
Hopefully people who hear you call us a gruesome twosome have seen It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and understand the reference. Yeah, I believe this is my first time doing the cycle on video, which is very exciting that we're doing that this year. Obviously, I was not here last week because, as you pointed out to everybody, violating HIPAA, I think, I had surgery last week. So, ironically, it was the same shoulder surgery you had at the end of December. I had here about 6 or 7 weeks later. I'm not in my sling now. It is my first time sitting at my computer, not in my sling. It will be going back on after the show, but I wanted to try and do a show here without it and look and hopefully sound somewhat normal. It's been a very difficult week and a half since the surgery, as I know you can relate to because you were just in that situation, sleeping very difficult. And along those lines, I've paid very little attention to baseball in the last week and a half here since spring training really got underway because I've been focused on early stages of recovery and everything else. So one of the things we're going to jump into here is you kind of catching me up on what I might have missed here in the early stages of spring training. How is your shoulder surgery recovering, though? I know there were some comments last week about you maybe being a little disrespectful, a little rude to me about mine. I'm going to turn the other cheek and actually be nice and respectful and ask you how you're doing, my dear friend.
I thought for sure you were teeing me up for an apology there. Yeah, there were a few comments, and thank you to everyone who chimed in with the comments, except for a couple people had some words for me. They didn't realize I was joking about your recovery, and
you were
coming
joking?
back to the show was 100% joking, especially as someone who went through the same surgery. It's funny. I was gonna surprise you by wearing my sling, so it would have been pretty ironic that if I wore mine and you did not wear yours.
That would show how I'm just Wolverine out here in my healing factor, right? If anybody notices me grimacing at all during the show, now that we're on video, it's because I'm trying to move my arm a little bit to type or something. I'm having to use a left-handed mouse these days, which is extremely a struggle for me. I'm very much right-handed, so we'll get through it the best we can. I didn't want to miss too many episodes here. I was really excited to do some of these preseason shows. We talked about maybe bringing Cycle back at opening day because that's when we started the show last year for our first season. But I think you and I really wanted to touch base and meet just once a week here, kind of in these month and a half or so between when pitchers and catchers report and when we actually get to opening day, and just kind of make sure we're on top of everything and bringing the people hopefully what they want, which is the cycle. So we'll dive right in. Today's episode, which you teased last week, is going to be about players that we hate ranking. These are the guys that, for you and me, and also for all the rankers, we looked a little bit at kind of the standard deviation of some of these guys' ranks, which you can find in our expert consensus rankings at FantasyPros.com. But it's guys that you and I have really found that we struggled to rank and really decide how we feel about them this year. We are going to include some names that you guys threw out in the comments, so please continue to do that. We really appreciate it, both in terms of giving us names that you guys want to hear us talk about, and also just for being a part of the show and part of that conversation. We're really excited to have everybody kind of hop into the comments now that we are on YouTube. So please continue to do that. We definitely appreciate it. And feel free to throw us, replies and comments on social media as well beyond YouTube. But YouTube is where we're most likely to see it. So we're going to jump into that. We have 3 players each that we wanted to talk about. We'll throw some honorable mentions out there. And then, like I said, a couple players that you guys suggested in the comments. But before we get into those players that we hate ranking, I do want to ask you to please catch me up, Mayor, on some of the big news and notes from the last couple weeks that I have not been paying attention to because I've been otherwise preoccupied.
Luckily there hasn't been too much crazy news. We had a pretty normal-ish offseason for baseball. It wasn't the last year or two where we got to this point of the year and some really big names remained unsigned. The last big name to sign, or one of the last big names to sign, was Alex Bregman, went to my Red Sox, which, the Red Sox finally spending some money. Pretty excited about that as a Red Sox fan, but also from a fantasy baseball perspective because maybe not the biggest jump going from like the Astros Park to Fenway Park. There's still kind of that like favorable left field for him, but also he's going to be eligible at second base, it sounds like, which is interesting for fantasy. So Alex Bregman, third base, second base eligible. I also wouldn't be surprised at some point if he played a little shortstop, assuming, Trevor Story inevitably goes on the injured list, not wishing for injuries, but, just kind of his history there. That's a possibility. So if you can get that kind of versatility from Alex Bregman, we're fully in baseball players being in the best shape of their lives and also adding new pitches. Some of the more exciting ones were if Paul Skeens wasn't already good enough, he's apparently adding a two-seamer and tinkering with a cutter. So that's pretty terrifying for opposing batters because Paul Skeens was already really good despite leaning on that fastball. Logan Gilbert is working on what appears to be a splinker, which is a fun hybrid sinker splitter pitch.
Can I ask you quickly on Skeens, where are you drafting him this year? Like not amongst pitchers, but like where in the first or second round or wherever it is that you have him? Because he's not something we're talking about today because obviously everybody really likes Skeens. There's not much to debate, but I always really struggle every year with deciding when I want to break the seal of going from, the top's always a handful of batters to kind of getting into that first pitcher. Where is Skeens going for you?
For me, he's going mid to late first round, and we talked about him last week as kind of if you're doing that pocket aces strategy. I kind of liked one thing I said, if you that I'm necessarily going to always do pocket aces this year, but if you kind of want to do it, one interesting way is that if you're like picking like 8th, 9th, 10th, close to the turn, and Skeens falls, you can potentially get Skeens and then Scooble on the way back and double dip. The other thing I like doing is, and we talked about it a little bit last week, if you want to do pocket aces, is get Skeens right there, like 5, 6, 7, 8, and then get another hitter in the second round. And then that third round, you'll still have a decent tier of pitchers, like a Logan Gilbert has fallen to the third round, like Kelly mentioned, if you want to do pocket aces. But also, I'm fine just taking Skeens as my first pitcher and then going hitter heavy and then dealing with pitcher the rest of the way, especially because when you get kind of into that mid to late first round, Skeens to me seems kind of more exciting than some of the other names that are going around there. Like, like especially when you get to like Fernando Tatis, Corbin Carroll, I feel like I would prefer Skeens over them.
I was going to ask you where that line of demarcation is, and that was exactly what I was going to say. Is so in ECR currently, if you look at it, at number 9 is Mookie Betts. After him, number 10 is Fernando Tatis, 11 Corbin Carroll, 12 is Francisco Lindor. I think after Betts, to me, it's like actually a no-brainer. It's like I am taking Skeens if those first 9 hitters are off the board regardless. There are some of those hitters that I would probably take Skeens over as well, but I think it's a no-brainer kind of at like that 10th pick maybe. Of those names ahead of him, and I'll just quickly read, it's Witt, Ohtani, Judge, Jose Ramirez, Ellie De La Cruz, Gunnar Henderson, Juan Soto, Kyle Tucker, Mookie Betts. The names everybody would expect, obviously. How many of those names do you think you would take Skeens over? Because you said mid-first, so that sounds more like 5th or 6th pick, or is it kind of that back end of the first?
Yeah, I said mid-first before I looked at the list, and then it's probably towards the later first. But it's also like if I'm going into a draft and I really want Skeens, I'm probably going to take him maybe after Ellie in that like 6th spot. But I also think you're completely justified taking that next tier of hitters over him, which is kind of why I landed in like that like 10, 11 Tatis Carroll spot.
For me, I think the only 4 names I'm not even considering Skeens over are Witt, Ohtani, Judge, and Jose Ramirez. Everybody else, I would at least kind of think about it if I'm on the clock and he's available. Yeah, not that we had to, like, obviously everybody likes Skeens. He's actually a little low in ECR. He's 17th overall and he's behind Tariq Skubal, but like for me, like Skeens is the first pitcher I'm taking, and he is not getting to the second round if I'm picking late in the first. Like I said, we don't need to dive too deep into that. I just was kind of curious because I think it's one of the more fascinating conversations every year in terms of like just how early do you want to pull the trigger on a pitcher, and for me, Skeens is that guy this year. So you said he's added some pitches, very scary. Logan Gilbert tinkering with the Splinker tinker. What else you got for me?
Splinker tinker. I mentioned it's a little bit more of a normal year. There are some still interesting free agents that have remained unsigned despite spring training started already. JD Martinez, Alex Verdugo, Spencer Turnbull. I thought was a really interesting name that I'm surprised no one has picked up. Jose Iglesias, Lance Lynn, Jose Quintana, and Kyle Gibson. So not like a real all-star lineup of players, but an interesting list of players. And a quick pop quiz for you from this list. And like, not that this is my war on war. A lot of people know that I'm not a huge war guy. But of the people on this list, who do you think had the highest war last year?
I don't know. On a Baseball Reference or on Fangraphs?
Fangraphs.
I'm gonna guess it's a hitter. Then was it Verdugo?
No, it's actually Jose Iglesias. Probably because it's like overvaluing his defense.
I almost said Iglesias for the glove only, but I just couldn't get there.
Yeah, and then who's projected to have? They're all free agents, obviously, but who's projected right now to have the highest WAR among this group?
Maybe Lynn or Gibson. Actually, I don't know. I don't even want to put a real guess to it. Who is it?
Well, you don't want to put a real guess to it, but you almost said the right name because it's Kyle Gibson.
Okay. I should
just stopped yourself short of saying the correct answer. And then the other thing, before we go too much further, is that you and I, much to your chagrin, tied the two-star pitcher competition from last season.
We definitely did not. This is false. I won't stand for these lies that you're saying.
Tied.
There's no way. I mean, it was horrible judgment of who won each week at the end of the year, which I wasn't even a part of. So I don't know how.
Whose fault is that?
Our bosses for saying I need to focus on football when we get to August. I don't agree with this. I don't think we tied the two-star pitcher competition. I want to go back and demand a recount.
Okay, I'll recount it right now. We tied. We still tied.
I believe I felt pretty strongly that in that final week you gave yourself a win when I think it must have been Kelly, but
false.
Made the pick
False. Kelly won the last week, so you haven't even looked into this much closer. So still wrong.
I refuse to believe this is accurate, and I will give you no more airtime to speak these lies into existence. All right, let's jump to the actual show here. Like I said, we're talking about kind of polarizing draft targets, guys that we are really struggling to rank. We didn't kind of intentionally do it by position, but we each have one infielder to talk about. We each have one pitcher coming back from injury to talk about. Then we kind of have like a wild card player at a different position to talk about. And then, like I said, we've got those listener picks as well. All right, we'll start with the infielders here, and we'll start with mine, Jackson Holliday. I actually didn't really intend to go into this with like starting off talking about an Oriole as my very first
diving
player
right
of the
just
year.
Picking up where you left off at the homework pick.
So in my defense, I sent you like 6 names and said I can't really pick like which 3 do you want to talk about, and Holliday was the only Oriole on that list, but we did end up picking an Oriole here. I think he's really fascinating to decide because you could hardly have had a more hyped prospect coming into last season. Not that he was like an all-time, but like he was up there in terms of his age and what he had done in his limited experience as a professional at the minor league level. And you couple that with, you could hardly have had a worse debut. There was a couple of stretches where it looked like he was turning things around, and he went on some heaters in terms of like, he had home runs like 3 straight days, some big hits. But overall, the batting average was 189. The OPS was 566. He only had 4 stolen bases in 60 games, which I was surprised by. I thought he was going to run a bit more. Obviously, the strikeouts were like a huge problem, particularly early. He struck out in 50% of his plate appearances in his first couple of weeks in the majors before being demoted, and then coming up again and doing a bit better his second time through. But overall, like obviously a very poor year. Having said that, he's now kind of gotten that under his belt. The Orioles, in particular, we have seen this happen a lot. Gunnar Henderson struggled his first kind of month or two in the big leagues. Adley Rutschman struggled for like a month before kind of breaking out. Jackson Holliday, a bit longer of a struggle. He was a bit younger than those guys too. And then they turned it on and showed everybody why they were number 1 prospects in baseball. Kind of once that switch was flipped. Holliday in camp looks yoked. He clearly beefed up in the offseason. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more power this year. He's now gotten to spend an entire offseason focusing solely on second base and knowing that's where he's going to be playing this year. I think there's a chance that he just explodes and has this awesome year at the position. I also think there's a chance that he's still young, the switch hasn't flipped yet, and he's not good. Given the pedigree and the age, I want to be buying Jackson Holliday. I want to have him on my teams and take that swing because I think there's a ton of real upside there, especially in a lineup where if he is good, if he is what we think he can be, You could slide him in at the top of the lineup, move Gunnar down to maybe the 3 spot, leave Adley at 2, and all of a sudden the opportunity for scoring more runs is going to be like immense as opposed to where he's been hitting, which is in that kind of 7, 8, 9 range. But the downside is clearly there because we just saw the downside last year, and it's really the pedigree that we're counting on as a reason to think he's going to take a big step forward rather than, at least in my opinion, anything we saw like in the underlying numbers last year at the end of the year. It was better than it was in April, but not like, oh, this is the most obvious breakout guy. So that's why I really struggle to rank him both at the position and kind of overall. What say you, Maher?
Yeah, I agree with most of what you said. I feel like this year we might still be, from a fantasy perspective, maybe like a year early. Like you said, he's still really young. He came up, he had a really rough start. I don't want to put too much weight into projections, but I always look at projections when I kind of like, pull up their pages and kind of like see what we're looking at. Projections don't love him, and with the caveat that projections are usually pretty conservative. So it's you're not going to see projections like predict a major breakout. So you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt when you are looking at projections. But I do kind of look at the consensus projections on FantasyPros and see what we're looking with. Shout out to Zeal Projections, by the way, second most accurate last season behind Derek Carty's The Bat X, and FantasyPros Zeal Projections are actually the first for pitching. So shout out to FantasyPros data team for that. But they haven't projected for like between 109 and 120 games, 11 home runs, 8 stolen bases, batting in like the 230s. That's pretty much the consensus across the board. That's not great, depending, for fantasy. Obviously, you would want to take like I said, that's being conservative. You want to take a bigger step forward.
I think that games total is wrong. I think he's playing every day for the most part. Like I don't think we're going to see the same level of sitting him against lefties that we saw last year. Like the way they approached this offseason, as an Orioles fan, I was somewhat frustrated by it. But it's very clear. It's Jordan Westburg is playing third base every day. Gunnar Henderson's playing shortstop every day, and Jackson Holliday is playing second base every day. And he will have to really struggle to not play 140 games, in my opinion. I could be proven wrong, but I'm expecting a full year from him.
Yeah, and that's possible, and they're definitely being conservative. It's you wonder, are they predicting more sitting versus lefties? Are they projecting him to get sent down at some point, which is possible? From a fantasy perspective, I do think it's a year early, but he is going pretty late. He's going. I was actually looking at my rankings. I have him ranked right around 200 right now. Let's see where his ADP is, and he's right around there. Like he's 194. So you're not gonna. It's not like a huge risk. You're not taking this guy in the first 5 rounds. And so there is the upside of like the breakout there. I tend to think we're still a year early just because of how young he is. But, a lot of potential there.
What do you think about at the position? He's 16th amongst second basemen right now in ECR, surrounded by names like he's right ahead of like Gleyber Torres, Jonathan India, Michael Garcia's 20th. Ahead of him, guys like Bryson Stott, Arraez, Nico Horner's a few spots ahead of him. Like, is that the right spot for him? Is 16th at the position?
Yeah, I would say it probably is. Nico Horner I would prefer over him. Matt Shaw is someone that Kelly talked about last week as a sleeper who's really intriguing, who's second, should have some second base eligibility. Bryson Stott, I feel like we know who Bryson Stott is, and he's like a solid baseball player, but Jackson Holliday might be more of like an exciting dart throw at that point, if we're picking like Bryson Stott versus Jackson Holliday. Jackson Holliday has some upside. Rafaela is right around there with second base eligibility. There are a lot of questions about like whether he's going to play every day. So there are, just as many questions about him and his like proclivity to swing at everything, to where Jackson Holliday might be a more exciting pick in that range. But I think that's right around where he should be. I don't think he should go much lower than that.
I'll say this. I think of all the names not in the top 6 of the position, if I had to bet on one that's the best value to possibly wind up in the top 6 this year, it's him. Because the downside is like super apparent, but so is the upside. And I think the upside is more enticing to me than some of these other names. All right, we got our Orioles talk out of the way. Who's your infielder that you wanted to talk about?
I wanted to go with Zach Neto, which I'm always tempted to say his name is like Neto, which then I just think about Anchorman, and my brain, my ADHD just starts taking me in a different direction, like Neto gang. But Zach Neto is a fascinating one because I look at the numbers and I'm kind of wowed that he went 23 home runs, 30 stolen bases, batted around 250. But like when I watch him and when I look at his underlying metrics, I'm like, are we sure he's good? And like now he's got an injury that he's dealing with too. Like it seems like he should be ready for opening day, but he just started like playing catch recently, I believe. So there's injury concern there too. And he's kind of a fascinating one for him, a fascinating rank for me because I look at him and I look at the numbers and I'm like, this is really valuable. But then I kind of dive into who he is as a player and I just kind of don't see it. And I want to move him lower in my rankings. And it just makes me nervous because if you look at, he's like, not that we want to like only look at StatCast data, but when you look at StatCast data, despite his production, it's a lot of blue and there are a lot of red flags there. And so even as someone who batted 249 last year, his expected batting average was 236. And you just look at like, his like sweet spot numbers, like not good. Chase, whiff, K rate, all well below average. Doesn't have a great like exit velocity or like barrel percentage. And it's just, I think we're going to see a lot of people kind of like projecting out that kind of production again. Like, I can get like 20 plus home runs, 30 stolen bases from him. And I get that. I get that kind of like power speed combo. But I also wonder if we're kind of over projecting him based on his, kind of like prospect pedigree and some of the kind of luck he ran into last year when some of the underlying numbers are not good.
I have a pretty clear answer to this. I wonder if you also see it the same way. What do you think he's more likely to repeat? 23 home runs or 30 stolen bases?
I would assume stolen bases.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He also got caught stealing 10 times last year, which is kind of a lot, but it kind of shows that the Angels didn't mind letting him run, certainly. I find it very difficult to imagine, it's only his second year. Like, he can still get better, obviously. I find it very difficult to imagine him getting 20 home runs again, given some of the underlying numbers you pointed out, whereas I do see him as a likely source of stolen bases. Maybe he doesn't get 30, but like I would imagine he is getting 20, 25, like at minimum, barring an injury. Whereas home runs, I'd be more comfortable. Like if you had to give me like what's the minimum you think he gets, it'd be more like 15, 18 rather than in the 20s.
Yeah, and it's just kind of, he had 23 home runs last year. And if you look at his, granted he, was drafted in 2022, I believe, and just kind of like has flown through the minor leagues. But he had 23 home runs last year, and in his like previous like 2 minor league seasons combined, he had like just around like 23 combined, dating all the way back to like high A ball. And so we just haven't seen this kind of power from him.
He played 84 games in 2023 and had 9 homers. So he played more than half a season and had single digits. So yeah, it just doesn't seem like, barring a lucky season, that's really in his skill set. He's 20th at shortstop, I think, right now in ECR. And he's, obviously his ADP is 183. So similar to Holliday, somebody that you're not having to spend big bucks on. So maybe worth a swing. But I think he's a good pick as somebody where kind of fitting this topic of conversation is a difficult person to rank, because if you just look at that, setting everything else aside, if you look at a 24-year-old shortstop who went 20-30 last year, that is somebody you want to invest in, but it's hard to want to rank him aggressively. A, given the strength of the position, and B, given all the stuff you laid out. All right, before we get into our injured pitchers, want to let everybody know about the Draft Simulator. Level up your fantasy baseball draft prep with FantasyPros Mock Draft Simulator. Complete realistic mock drafts in minutes without waiting between picks. Tailor your mock drafts to your league's specific settings, including roster configurations and scoring systems. Receive instant feedback and draft grades to refine your strategy and gain a competitive edge. Prepare confidently and dominate your draft with the Mock Draft Simulator at fantasypros.com/mock. I will be using that Mock Draft Simulator a lot because I have joined a couple of new leagues this year, including one that you invited me to, Mayor, which I appreciate. Although I didn't agree to join until Dan Harris made the official invite, and I want that on record. And
in my defense, it was my idea for him to text you. I was like, why don't you text him? You can bring this over the finish line. Like, give him the old Dan Harris charm and bring it home. And lo and behold, nailed it.
It worked. It worked 100%. I'm excited to be in that league. It's a fun one that you've talked about on the show before. But I definitely need to get some prep in. It's probably not the type of league, now that I say it out loud, that I can really use the draft simulator for. It's a very specific rule league, but I'll certainly be using the simulator for all of my other league prep that I need to do and catch up on all the stuff I've been missing with the surgery. All right, let's get to our injured pitchers here. I'll let you go first this time. Who you got?
Sure, I'm going to go. I think we have two interesting names here in terms of just kind of like injured pitchers, like high-end pitchers returning, from injury. Spencer Strider is a really fascinating one because, he was SP1 last year or going into last year and, 2023, 281 strikeouts.
He wasn't just SP1. He was like what we just talked about with Skeens. Like, where in the first round are you taking Strider?
Yeah,
he was like
exactly
the clear cut, no doubt about it, SP1.
Yeah, I took him in the first round in a few, or at least a couple high stakes leagues. I mentioned this in the YouTube comments last week when I was chatting with people. I mentioned they were talking about going double aces and SP early, and I mentioned I kind of took a big swing in some high stakes leagues on a different strategy and took Strider in the first round, and obviously it went poorly for me. But also, if you took Ronald Acuna in the first round last year, probably didn't have a great year either. The thing with Strider is I don't always love taking players who are already injured, especially pitchers, because you're already going to deal with enough injuries. I don't like starting with players who are already injured. The thing that's intriguing about him is that he's going pretty late. And even though there's some questions about whether or not he's going to start the year, like some people think he's going to, maybe miss the first month, he's already throwing off a mound. We're in February. We're still a month from the season starting, and he's already throwing off a mound. How much time is he really going to miss? They're projecting him for about 120 innings. 120 innings out of Spencer Strider, a lot more valuable than 120 innings out of a lot of other pitchers, especially if maybe you push that to like 130, 140 innings. Now we're talking.
He in 2022 he only threw 131 innings and he still had over 200 strikeouts. Exactly. He doesn't need that much work if he's what he was before to help you immensely in a category like that.
And he's just going late enough. Let's look at his ADP from recent drafts. His ADP is 127. So you can get him, like, you're not paying out, even if you want to, like, we talked about this a little bit last week with like different like fantasy baseball draft strategies, which you can go check out that video with me and Kelly too, because we talked about some of this stuff. But just like, if there's an interesting kind of like middle ground of pitcher this year, if you want to hammer like hitters early, and then you can start hitting like Spencer Strider, Alcantara, and some of these other, like Jeffrey Springs late. You can start hitting this, like, there's a lot of value. Obviously, you're like, some of these pitchers are not going to really like pan out, but there's just really interesting middle area of pitchers that you don't have to pay up for, because the pitchers this year, like there's top tiers of Skeens, Skubal, then I think there's a tier break, Wheeler, Logan Gilbert, then I think there's another tier break, and then it's like you get into more question marks like Corbin Burns, Garrett Crochet, Chris Sale, and then you're getting pretty far down the list. And the difference between like SP10 and SP40 or so might not be that big this year. And if you can hit on names like Spencer Strider, after pick 100, there's a lot of upside there.
I think he's a great call for this discussion. I was going to ask you if I had missed kind of any early updates. It looks like on his page on FantasyPros, just kind of looking at the news and notes, mixed in a curveball during side session Friday. That was 4 days ago. So next step, facing live hitters. I am with you, particularly at pitcher. I just tend to not want the injured guys. Like, again, it's like drafting in football in general, but specifically for pitchers in baseball, you're going to get hit with injuries. Why add to that risk on purpose? And Strider is such an exception because the ceiling isn't, oh, this is like a quality starting pitcher in your rotation. The ceiling is, holy cow, you got the best pitcher in fantasy baseball again. Now, I don't think either of us are thinking he's going to be that, even in a best case scenario when he returns, but it's a non-zero chance that he is an elite ace, like in the innings he's giving you, even if it's not going to be, a full workload of innings. So I view him actually for different reasons, similarly to how I viewed Skeens last year, where I wasn't entirely sure what the timeline was going to be. I wasn't entirely sure how the team was going to treat him once he was pitching in terms of the number of innings, but that I was reasonably certain the innings we were going to get were going to be pretty superb if he was actually out there. And if you invested in Skeens, that worked out really well for you. By the end of the season, you had this absolute stud. So the fact that I'm kind of making that comparison almost makes me think he should be ranked higher, or at least somebody that I draft higher than an ADP of 127 to make sure I get him. But similar to, all the guys we're going to talk about, obviously the reason they're on this list is because there's an upside case and a downside case. I don't know where I really come down in terms of like specifically where I'm drafting him. So like if you want to be aggressive and get him, how much earlier than that? As of right now, and his ADP might change with news updates throughout March, but as of right now, where would you actually like click draft on him to make sure you get him if you want to take that risk?
Well, that's what I'm thinking, because he's going like 10th, 11th round right now, and drafts are going to start coming up. I've only drafted one league right now, but over the next few weeks, I'm going to have a lot more drafts. And like I said, he's already kind of throwing. And if we start getting more and more positive reports from him, that ADP is going to rise. And then it's a question of how far does it rise to the point where I'm comfortable. Right now, I feel like I'm comfortable rolling the dice in the 8th round, which is still, not that big of a risk, assuming, you have some pretty good picks in the first 7 rounds, which if you don't, you're kind of screwed anyway. But I don't know that I can, like, at his current ADP, he's going like 10th, 11th round. And I'm fine taking him a round or two earlier to make sure I get him to kind of take that swing. Once his ADP, if it goes much higher than that and we go like 7th, 6th round, then I start getting nervous that I don't know, one, if you're going to get the ROI there, and if there becomes more risk, and the value kind of shrinks.
So let's loop in my injured pitcher who's going in a very similar spot in drafts. It's Shane McClanahan, who was obviously awesome prior to his injury. Now, feels like a long while ago, because it kind of was. Unlike Strider, there's no confusion about his timeline. He has been announced as the Rays opening day starter already, which it was a piece of news I did see. 17 months removed from his Tommy John surgery. So, like I said, it's been like a year and a half. But we know he's going to be back out there already. Obviously, a pitcher who was very good prior to the injury. He's still only 27 years old. It's not like he's, that much older. In 2023, the last time we saw him, his ERA was 3.29. He struck out 121 batters in 115 innings, which was a step down from his 2022, which was superb, a 2.54 ERA. His strikeout rate was over 30%. He had 194 in 166 and a third innings. Just a very, very good pitcher in an organization that knows how to use their pitchers. We haven't seen him in a while. So he's a couple of spots higher than Strider in ECR rank amongst pitchers. Strider's 51 and McClanahan's 48th at the position, but ADP is a couple spots lower. Strider's 127, McClanahan's 131. Would you rather have Strider or McClanahan this year?
That's a great question, and I love this pick because of what you said, because it's not like his injury was much longer ago. Like, he was working his way back towards the end of last year and probably could have returned at the tail end of the season, and they just kind of opted to play it safe. So now he's had several more months to continue getting ready. And the projections are showing that too, because while Strider was projected at like 120 innings, they're already saying McClanahan could throw 160 or more. And that's really exciting, given how good he was when he was on the mound. In that league that you just joined, there's some Shane McClanahan lore there, because a few years ago, our friend of the show, Brendan Tuma, posted like a draft day screenshot on the morning of our auction. Or
by draft day, you mean the movie draft day?
Movie draft day.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shane McClanahan no matter what. And then Tuma and I got into a bidding war for McClanahan, and he thought I was just going to one-up him for the rest of the evening, but I really was at my limit, and he stopped, and so I ended up getting McClanahan, and he brings it up every year. But yeah, I would, to answer your question, I think I would rather have McClanahan, just because you're going to get more out of him. And there's risk with all pitchers, especially pitchers recovering from injury, but his timeline is so much different. Like, it's so different from Strider that there's a lot more there.
So why do you think McClanahan's ADP is lower? Because I just think the certainty of knowing he's going to be on the mound day one is worth, at the very least, being a better ADP than Strider, if not significantly better, just given that there is still confusion with Strider. And it's not like McClanahan is a slouch, right? Like, again, he maybe wasn't as elite as Strider was, but very, very, very good starting pitcher when we last saw him. So why is the ADP like that? I would think the certainty of the injury is people just forgetting about him. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, maybe, some people forgetting about him, and then also just kind of like disagreeing on the ceiling, because Shane McClanahan could be an SP1, maybe not SP1 overall, but like an SP1 for sure. Whereas like Strider potentially is the best pitcher in baseball. But like you said, McClanahan has no slouch either. He's still really, really good, and we've seen him be really, really good. And so, yeah, no, I completely agree. He's difficult to rank, but also I feel like I'm going to be more aggressive on him just because of what we see.
If I can get McClanahan in the like early 11th round or whatever 131 is with the math, I mean, I'm going to be sprinting to the podium to make that pick. Like that. See, if he starts to go up in ADP, maybe that it becomes a different conversation, similar to Strider. But right now, like that is, to my opinion, one of the most screaming values you can have in a draft this year is the upside you can get with McClanahan with less injury uncertainty than you're going to get with some of these other guys. So I think these are two guys that are going to be kind of tied together throughout most of the year, honestly, in terms of how I'm evaluating them, given where they're going in drafts right now.
Yep, I agree.
All right, let's go to our kind of last, players each. There's no theme with this one. We just each picked one more player. I went with Brent Rooker, and when I was sitting down to think about these players, there was kind of a couple different categories, and I tried to hit on all of them. There were the injured guys, who that's why they're uncertain. It's just strictly injury. There's the young guys who haven't broken out yet, like a Jackson Holliday. And then there's the guys who, have shown it, but at a surprising age or a surprising point in their career where you have to question kind of how legitimate it is. Brent Rooker was awesome last year. It's not like he's in, late 30s. He is 30 right now. But that's a late breakout. He's also going to be playing in this, weird Sacramento park with a bad A's team. But you look at the numbers from last year, 39 home runs, 112 RBI, even on a bad team. He stole 11 bases, so like he wasn't even a zero there. And he almost hit 300. His batting average was 293. His BABIP was definitely elevated, so I wouldn't expect another 293 season from him. But an OPS over 900, another 30 home run season, which he also did in 2023, by the way. He had 30 home runs. The stolen bases, I think, is somewhat legitimate. He only had 4 the year before, but I, give him 8 or something like that. I think it's very much on the table. And yet, late stage breakout always kind of has me worried, especially when it's coupled with a BABIP like the one he had, and seems to be a degree of luck in there as well. His ADP is 58, so this is a guy who's going much higher than some of the other names we've talked about. If you were going to guarantee he was going to repeat last season, he'd be even higher than 58, much higher than 58. So there's already some of that uncertainty baked in. I really struggle with where to rank him. Also, DH only in some leagues. I believe, according to our site, on Yahoo, he's outfield eligible. On ESPN and CBS, he's DH only, which is why he is kind of listed as, rostered higher in Yahoo. This would be a reason for that. So that also, plays a role in evaluating him. What do you make of Rooker? Obviously, we know he was great last year. And we talked about him a lot on the show last year, actually, too. But what do you make about him for ranking him in 2025?
Yeah, he's a tough one because of what you said. He's 30. He's not ancient, but he also didn't really break out until he was 30, or maybe like 28. If you count 2023 as his breakout. But if Brent Rooker's 25 years old, he's a first round pick, and you're kind of like projecting it out. But since he's not, and since like the BABIP was elevated, but expected batting average is still 266. If you can sign up for 266 and 40 home runs, and then also sprinkle in double digit stolen bases, like, everyone is looking for that on draft day. But he is difficult to draft or to rank for the reasons you mentioned. It's kind of hard to trust this late breakout. The BABIP was inflated. Still like an incredible hitter. The ballpark thing is really interesting because it seems like the dimensions, it's not going to be like a Dunedin. It seems like the dimensions for this ballpark are going to be pretty similar to the Coliseum in Oakland, just with less foul territory. But also, who knows how this park is going to play? The balls could be flying out of there just based on how these smaller ballparks, like smaller stadiums, ballpark type of things play. Or maybe it has like a really tough batter's eye, like what's going on in Seattle, where it's just like hard to see there. So you don't want to like overemphasize the ballpark stuff, but it's something to think about that makes it difficult to rank anyone on the A's. But you would have to assume it's not going to be worse than the Coliseum, you would think.
I think the general consensus from people smarter than me has been that it will
smarter than you.
Yeah, can you imagine? Is that it'll be more hitter friendly than the Coliseum, but still would skew towards pitcher friendly. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to pretend to have like a ton of knowledge or expertise about how that will actually play out. It'll be it'll be a very key storyline to pay attention to early in the year, certainly. But my expectation is better than Coliseum, but still pitcher friendly.
Yeah. And I mean, like, we'll see. There's so much unknown there. But yeah, it makes him, difficult to rank because of you've seen this production and you kind of just want to sign up for it again. But also it kind of makes you a little nervous based on, not a long track record there.
I kind of feel like I will ultimately end up drafting him ahead of ADP because at least on the power, this is not his first time hitting 30 home runs. So I think it's reasonable to expect a healthy season is going to be another at 30-ish home run year from him. Whether or not he gets 100 RBI in this lineup, who's to say? Whether or not he steals another 10 bases, who's to say? To me, like the real question mark of should he be going where he's going is the batting average. And in the modern era, you can stomach a lower bat. If you're giving me 33 home runs and 9 stolen bases, I think it's a pretty with the upside of maybe a decent batting average too, building in some downside possibility as well. To me, that sounds worth it. He's ranked 60th in ECR right now, which is almost exactly in line with ADP. To me, like a late 5th round pick, I'll be happy to take him. I think with an early 5th round pick, maybe even like a late 4th, depending on how my team looks in the early stages of a draft. I think that's good value.
Would you rather have Brent Rooker or Teoscar Hernandez?
I think I would rather have Rooker. Teoscar is 55th in ECR, so obviously they're very close. His ADP is slightly lower though; it's 63. My gut reaction to that: Teoscar obviously like 33 home runs last year, 12 stolen bases, so like a good comp there. We know that lineup certainly looks a lot different than the Athletics lineup. My gut reaction when you ask me that question is Rooker, but I think they're probably very close. Do you have a clear lean on that?
No, that's why I asked. That they're pretty similar, maybe a round apart, but I think I would go Rooker just because of the power potential. They're
back to back
12 more
at outfield. They're outfielder 17 and outfielder 18.
Yeah, I think you could get 12 more home runs from Rooker, which is worth it.
And by the way, that's if Rooker is outfield eligible. If he's not, very much changes the calculus, depending on the league you're in. All right, who's your other player you want to hit on?
So fellow Dodger, Teoscar Hernandez, Roki Sasaki. And really, it's just the unknown here. It's just, I feel like there's a lot of, like when his name was kind of first floated, we heard a lot of, oh, he might need some time in the minors. Like he's a really, really intriguing, like really young pitcher, really intriguing prospect, And then he signs with the Dodgers, and all of a sudden it's just like, oh, he's penciled in. He's going to be awesome, and he's being drafted really aggressively. And I just think because of the unknown and because of how deep the Dodgers are, it makes it really difficult for me to rank because I don't want to be too aggressive on him because the Dodgers have the luxury of just like rolling out a 6-man rotation or just like sitting him down for a little while. At which point, you already have the uncertainty of like this guy's never pitched in the major leagues before. And I'm not disagreeing with all the, as you would say, smarter people than me who are projecting him to be really good because he was really, really good in another league. And so it's just like the unknown of like, we've never seen this guy pitch in the majors. And I am confident he's going to be good, but also he's on a really deep Dodgers team. And there's the potential that you draft him aggressively and then he just, he's in a 6-man rotation or he gets sent down for a month and you're just like stuck with that roster spot. And so I think I'm probably not going to have a ton of him. In Dynasty, he's the 101, like Dynasty rookie drafts, he's the 101 pick this year. But in redraft leagues, he just makes me nervous going where he's going. It looks like, I don't know if you pulled up the ADP, but it was like around like 120.
It's just after 100.
Oh, so it's 101. So I have him around 120, 125, and he's just at like 101.
And he's
so
46th amongst pitchers in ranking, and his ADP is 101.
Yeah, so that's scary for me. That's, you have to be really confident that he's really, really good that the Dodgers aren't going to play games.
Let me ask you this. Yamamoto pitched 90 innings last year. In those 90 innings, he had an ERA of exactly 3. His whip was 111. He had 105 strikeouts in those 90 innings, 22 walks. In the innings we get from Roki, I'm not going to have you guess how many innings he throws because it's the Dodgers and first year and all that. But in the innings we get, will he be better or worse than the innings we got from Yamamoto last year?
I mean, I think Yamamoto was a better prospect, so I think worse.
It's a high bar to clear. I'm not saying it's like an easy thing. I tend to agree that I think he'll be worse.
My main thing is like, look at the Dodgers. And like, we've been complaining all year. Like earlier in the year on Slack, we talked about like, doing some rapid reaction stuff for like players signing with teams. And I joked with Welsh, I was like, just do all of them for the Dodgers because 75% of them will be right. You don't have to redo them. And lo and behold, that was oddly accurate. But if you look at the pitchers, Yamamoto, Snell, Glasnow, Sasaki, Gonsolin, and that's not even including Clayton Kershaw, and who apparently is just going to be back with them. And
he'll get a lot of wins though. Like, anytime these guys are on the mound, you're expecting them to get you a win, which isn't nothing.
Yeah. Dustin May, a really good baseball pitching prospect. He's like SP9 on the Dodgers. So like if he struggles even a little bit, he's just not going to be in the starting rotation. And I feel like we're kind of taking that for granted right now.
I think Roki's really good. I really like him as a prospect. I think he's on par with Yamamoto. Who's better? I don't know. But, Roki's obviously young too, but I really like him. I don't know. I went into this conversation. It's funny. I'm kind of like thinking it through on the show. I started this conversation thinking I think an ADP of 101 is actually quite reasonable, and I'll probably want to draft him a lot. As we're talking out, I'm actually thinking 101 is actually pretty high. There's probably going to be other players that I like better in that range, and somebody in I think I'll want him sooner than your ranking of like that 120 range, but I think there will be somebody in all of my leagues who wants him before me. Maybe not drastically before, but it only takes one person to be higher on him than me, and I get the feeling that'll happen in a lot of my leagues.
Yeah, he's a sexy name. He's going to go around earlier than a lot of leagues.
Yeah. All right, so that's Roki. So those are our names. So just as a recap, Jackson Holliday and Zach Neto, Shane McClanahan and Spencer Strider, and Brent Rooker and Roki Sasaki. We got some listener picks here as well, a couple of hitters. The first one, I think you and I both easily could have picked this name if it hadn't been suggested by a listener. It's a name that we talked about last year as, we couldn't believe where he was going in some rounds and, in some drafts rather. And then early on, it looked like a really smart pick and then went back to the usual. It's Mike Trout, best baseball player of, the last decade. Has been so many, Kelly in her kind of expert note on the site starts off his little expert note as Mike Trout has firmly landed in the what if category for both fantasy and real life baseball. That's a great way to put it. We saw in April of last year, holy cow, 10 home runs in a month, also 6 stolen bases. This is back to top 5 pick in fantasy drafts, Mike Trout. And then it, reverse back the other way, snip, snap of, okay, here he's hurt again. We see it every year. When was the last time he played anywhere close to a full season? It's been like 6 years at this point. So I think is the perfect name to include here because when he's on the field, I once again am pretty confident he's going to be darn good. And yet you look at the games played totals going back, starting from last year, 29, 82, 119, 36, 53, which was the COVID year, obviously. And then 2019, he played 134. That's not even really that's like 20 games shy. It's the last time he played 140 games in a season was 2018. I don't know how you can draft him, honestly. I didn't even look at where he's ranked.
In 2019, 134 games, 45 home runs in 134 games. Now, granted, that was a bounty ball year, but yeah.
Yeah, true. He's ranked. His ADP is 98. He's amongst hitters 71st in ECR. I can't do it there. I'm not. No part of me, not even a little bit, am I confident that he's going to play 100 games this season. You just can't be. It's not like you get healthier as you get older, right? We both had surgery this year. We know the older you get, the more easy it is to get hurt, the harder it is to bounce back from those injuries. He's not really in his early 30s anymore. He's borderline in his mid 30s. I just don't see how you can possibly have any degree of confidence. Again, ADP 98. Sasaki's ADP 101. I'd rather take the chance on Roki. Different positions, clearly, but
I was going to ask you that. I was going to ask you that comp.
Because I don't want to be the guy with the headache of Mike Trout. And it's really sad to say, but that's my stance on it.
I'm in. I'm doing it one more time. Give me
Wow.
one more
One
year
last
of
job.
Mike Trout. I'm in. One more year. I'm trying. One of these years, you're going to be right. And I'm kind of a hypocrite because I'm in the opposite camp for Byron Buxton, who I'm just like, I've been avoiding for a decade.
Yeah.
I don't think they have similar ceilings. I think Mike Trout's ceiling is the best player in baseball. But
Do you think that's still true?
I mean, no. No.
I was going to say, like, well, A, we haven't seen him be the best player in baseball in a while.
Right.
And B, his competition for that title is stronger than it's ever been, between Ohtani and, five other names that are going to go early.
The other thing from a fantasy perspective is he doesn't run anymore, which was the real kind of.
He had 6 stolen bases in April of last year.
Oh, that's right. He was running last year in April.
He had
we talked about it at the time because he had like 6 the last 4 years combined.
He did. He had that's exactly right. He had as many stolen bases last year in just 29 games as he did the previous 4 years combined in some quick math, something like 280 games. So there was kind of a return there, and he also had the worst batting average of his career, which I don't think got talked about as much last year because his season ended so early.
The expected numbers were there, though. It was expected to be better than what it was.
That's true. The BABIP was under 200, so like clearly a huge outlier there. But it does stand out in looking at his stat log year by year just how much lower it was.
Yeah, and now they're moving him to like right field, and they're like, that'll fix everything. Like we'll keep him healthy in right field. I was like,
we have to come up with a bet for this year on Mike Trout, and I will gladly take the side of fading him. Oh, well, not gladly. I'm not happy about it, but I will confidently take the side of fading him if you want to take the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good plug for the YouTube comments too. Of what are some ideas for a good Mike Trout bet for this year? Because I'm doing it one more year. I'm in on Mike Trout. I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going down with the ship.
Yes, please drop in the comments some ideas, both for the bet and for what we should be looking at. Should we be looking at certain stats? I would even do a bet on just games played. Does he hit X number? So let us know what you think we should do there. Willson Contreras is the other name that was thrown out by the listeners. Cardinals catcher, 32. His ADP is 104, so another guy kind of right in this range near Trout and Roki. He is somebody. It looks like I keep checking the player news and all these guys just to make sure I didn't miss anything the last 2 weeks. Like, oh, he got hurt or whatever. Started at first base for the Cardinals on Saturday in a spring training game. So I guess going to be splitting time there with Burleson, first base and designated hitter. Still will be catcher eligible going into this year for leagues, which is almost certainly where you're going to be playing him. But that's always really appealing as a guy who's not taking that wear and tear behind the plate, but who is eligible there. How are you ranking Contreras? Do you agree with him as a guy who's very difficult for you to rank?
Yeah, I thought this was a great poll from the YouTube comments last week. For what you said, he's kind of every year or every few years, there's like that player who comes up who's catcher eligible, but isn't catching and is playing every day because the catch with like catchers is one, they need more time off than other players, and two, just like the wear and tear of catching, just your offensive production isn't as consistent. But if we can, like Willson Contreras is a really good hitter, and if he's playing first base / DH and not catching every day and is playing every day, now we're talking in terms of kind of like a cheat code for catcher. I don't want to overvalue it and just kind of like go too crazy. But his ADP?
I think it's exciting. I mean, he's hit over 260 the last 2 years. In 84 games last year, he had 15 home runs. If you're giving me more games and less wear and tear at defensively, that's and can still play him at catcher, that's really exciting to me. I think it's a great pick, and I will be ranking him higher than his ADP of 104. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, and going right around Mike Trout and Roki Sasaki. What a fascinating trio of players to rank there.
Where is he in ECR amongst catchers? I didn't pull that up. I'm going to pull it up now. He is 7th, and he's behind William Contreras, Adley, Salvador Perez, Diaz, Raleigh, and Will Smith. So fair. I don't know that I want to make a case for him being higher than where he is, but I think I'd be very happy to have him with has that 7th catcher off the board. Is that about right for you?
Yeah, if not a little bit higher, just kind of.
Who would you knock down?
I mean, I'm a big Will Smith guy, but I think I could justify putting him above Will Smith just because if we're just counting on playing time, I think the counting stats could go above Will Smith based on playing time alone.
If he plays, I don't know what he's going to do. I mean, he's in his 30s. If Contreras plays 145, 150 games this year at a less taxing defensive position, maybe it is more of a cheat code that we're even giving credence to. Maybe he should be like 4th on this list. Like it is it's math, right? At the end of the day, like these other catchers are not going to play. They're not going to get as many plate appearances as he is. Maybe a guy like Adley, like if they call up, Basayo and give Adley more time at DH, they do like to have him play every day. Obviously, Salvador Perez is somebody who's like, been very durable and played a ton. But like in general, a catcher is not going to play as much as a guy like Contreras might play this year. And that's simple math.
Yeah, also just like as a hitter, he also like if you look at the other names on the list, like a Cal Raleigh, like you're sacrificing something because you're getting a lot of power from him, but you're sacrificing the average. You're not really sacrificing Willson Contreras because he is just a good hitter across the board.
I play in a very long running 2-catcher league, and I hate it because 2-catcher leagues are the bane of my existence most of the time. I'll be really, I think, aggressively trying to get Contreras in a league like that. I think he's going to be really valuable in a format like that where you have to go really deep at such a crappy position. So yeah, great listener picks, both Trout and Contreras. Great options there. We don't really have anything else today. We don't have our usual, wrap up the show with X, Y, or Z because we're certainly not going to do, our key games to watch when we're still in spring training.
Spring training, 2-star pitchers.
Yeah, 2-star pitcher contest in February. But thank you everybody for tuning in and for all the comments last week. Please, continue to let us know what you want to hear from us. Next week's episode, we are doing an all blank team. So like an all sleeper team, an all breakouts team, an all first year or second year player team. But we haven't landed on what we want to do with the team yet. We think it could go a couple different directions. So what we might do is do a couple of them and move kind of quicker through our picks for each of our all insert something here team. And we want you guys to let us know what you want us to hear. Should it be an all bust team? Should it be an all speed team, an all power team, an all well-rounded player team, an all AL East team? I don't know. I'm just trying to throw out different examples I could think of.
An all injury risk team.
All injury risk team, that's a good one. Or a more standard classic kind of all breakout, all sleeper. Whatever you guys want to hear, we will try and do a couple of them in next week's episode. So feel free to throw out a few different options if you have them. And feel free to let us know players if you make a suggestion on that team that you think should be on that team. We'll let you know if we agree when we make our picks here next week. So please let us know what you thought of today's episode. If there are any other players that you are really struggling to rank this year, let us know. We'll chat with you in the comments as well. But definitely tell us what kind of teams you want us to throw out next week. For Mayor, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Also, I didn't say this already, but thank you very much to Kelly for filling in last week for me, where I was very much not in a position to be doing any kind of show in those first few days post-surgery. So I really appreciate her filling in. She's going to be on the show a ton this year, of course, as she always will be. So for Kelly last week, for Mayor, and myself this week, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time.